Again, the same is true of that difficult matter of the danger of the soul, which has unsettled so many just minds. To hope for all souls is imperative, and it is quite tenable that their salvation is inevitable. It is tenable, but it is not specially favourable to activity or progress. Our fighting and creative society ought rather to insist on the danger of everybody, on the fact that every man is hanging by a thread or clinging to a precipice. To say that all will be well anyhow is a comprehensible remark, but it cannot be called the blast of a trumpet. Europe ought rather to emphasize possible perdition, and Europe always has emphasized it. Here its highest religion is at one with all its cheapest romances. To the Buddhist or the Eastern fatalist, existence is a science or a plan, which must end up in a certain way. But to a Christian, existence is a story, which may end up in any way. In a thrilling novel, that purely Christian product, the hero is not eaten by cannibals, but it is essential to the existence of the thrill that he might be eaten by cannibals. The hero must, so to speak, be an eatable hero. So Christian morals have always said to the man, not that he would lose his soul, but that he must take care that he didn't. In Christian morals, in short, it is wicked to call a man damned, but it is strictly religious and philosophic to call him damnable. All Christianity concentrates on the man at the crossroads. The vast and shallow philosophies, the huge syntheses of humbug, all talk about ages and evolution and ultimate developments. The true philosophy is concerned with the instant. Will a man take this road or that? That is the only thing to think about, if you enjoy thinking. The aeons are easy enough to think about. Anyone can think about them. The instant is really awful. And it is because our religion has intensely felt the instant that it has in literature dealt much with battle, and in theology dealt much with hell. It is full of danger, like a boy's book. It is an immortal crisis. There is a great deal of real similarity between popular fiction and the religion of the Western people. If you say that popular fiction is vulgar and tawdry, you only say what the dreary and well-informed say also about the images in the Catholic churches. Life, according to the faith, is very like a serial story in a magazine. Life ends with the promise, or menace, to be continued in our next. Also, with a noble vulgarity, life imitates the serial and leaves off at the exciting moment. For death is distinctly an exciting moment. But the point is that a story is exciting because it has in it so strong an element of will, of what theology calls free will. You cannot finish a sum how you like, but you can finish a story how you like. When somebody discovered the differential calculus, there was only one differential calculus he could discover. But when Shakespeare killed Romeo, he might have married him to Juliet's old nurse if he had felt inclined. And Christendom has excelled in the narrative romance exactly because it has insisted on the theological free will. It is a large matter, and too much to one side of the road to be discussed adequately here, but this is the real objection to that torrent of modern talk about treating crime as disease, about making a prison merely a hygienic environment like a hospital, of healing sin by slow scientific methods. The fallacy of the whole thing is that evil is a matter of active choice, whereas disease is not. If you say that you are going to cure a profligate as you cure an asthmatic, my cheap and obvious answer is, produce the people who want to be asthmatics, as many people want to be profligates. A man may lie still and be cured of a malady, but he must not lie still if he wants to be cured of a sin. On the contrary, he must get up and jump about violently. The whole point, indeed, is perfectly expressed in the very word which we use for a man in a hospital. Patient is in the passive mood. Sinner is in the active. If a man is to be saved from influenza, he must be a patient. But if he is to be saved from forging, he must not be a patient, but an impatient. He must be personally impatient with forgery. All moral reform must start in the active, not the passive will. Here again we reach the same substantial conclusion. In so far as we desire the definite reconstructions and dangerous revolutions which have distinguished European civilization, we shall not discourage the thought of possible ruin. We shall rather encourage it. If we want, like the Eastern saints, merely to contemplate how right things are, of course we shall only say that they must go right. But if we particularly want to make them go right, we must insist that they may go wrong. Lastly, this truth is yet again true in the case of the common modern attempts to diminish or to explain away the divinity of Christ. The thing may be true or not. That I shall deal with before I end. But if the divinity is true, it is certainly terribly revolutionary. That a good man may have his back to the wall is no more than we already knew. But that God could have his back to the wall is a boast for all insurgents forever. Christianity is the only religion on earth that has felt that omnipotence made God incomplete. Christianity alone has felt that God, to be wholly God, must have been a rebel as well as a king. Alone of all creeds, Christianity has added courage to the virtues of the Creator. For the only courage worth calling courage must necessarily mean that the soul passes a breaking point and does not break. In this indeed I approach a matter more dark and awful than it is easy to discuss, and I apologize in advance if any of my phrases fall wrong, or seem irreverent touching a matter which the greatest saints and thinkers have justly feared to approach. But in that terrific tale of the Passion there is a distinct emotional suggestion that the author of all things, in some unthinkable way, went not only through agony, but through doubt. It is written, "Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." No, but the Lord thy God may tempt himself, and it seems as if this was what happened in Gethsemane. In a garden Satan tempted man, and in a garden God tempted God. He passed in some superhuman manner through our human horror of pessimism. When the world shook and the sun was wiped out of heaven, it was not at the crucifixion, but at the cry from the cross, the cry which confessed that God was forsaken of God. And now let the revolutionists choose a creed from all the creeds, and a God from all the gods of the world, carefully weighing all the gods of inevitable recurrence and of unalterable power. They will not find another God who has himself been in revolt. Nay, the matter grows too difficult for human speech, but let the atheists themselves choose a God. They will find only one divinity who ever uttered their isolation, only one religion in which God seemed for an instant to be an atheist. These can be called the essentials of the old orthodoxy, of which the chief merit is that it is the natural fountain of revolution and reform, and of which the chief defect is that it is obviously only an abstract assertion. Its main advantage is that it is the most adventurous and manly of all theologies. Its chief disadvantage is simply that it is a theology. It can always be urged against it that it is in its nature arbitrary and in the air. But it is not so high in the air but that great archers spend their whole lives in shooting arrows at it. Yes, and their last arrows. There are men who will ruin themselves and ruin their civilization if they may ruin also this old fantastic tale. This is the last and most astounding fact about this faith, that its enemies will use any weapon against it, the swords that cut their own fingers and the firebrands that burn their own homes. Men who begin to fight the Church for the sake of freedom and humanity end by flinging away freedom and humanity if only they may fight the Church. This is no exaggeration. I could fill a book with the instances of it. Mr. Blatchford set out, as an ordinary Bible smasher, to prove that Adam was guiltless of sin against God. In manoeuvring so as to maintain this, he admitted as a mere side issue that all the tyrants from Nero to King Leopold were guiltless of any sin against humanity. I know a man who has such passion for proving that he will have no personal existence after death that he falls back on the position that he has no personal existence now. He invokes Buddhism and says that all souls fade into each other. In order to prove that he cannot go to heaven, he proves that he cannot go to Hartlepool. I have known people who protested against religious education with arguments against any education, saying that the child's mind must grow freely, or that the old must not teach the young. I have known people who showed that there could be no divine judgment by showing that there can be no human judgment, even for practical purposes. They burned their own corn to set fire to the church. They smashed their own tools to smash it. Any stick was good enough to beat it with, though it were the last stick of their own dismembered furniture. We do not admire, we hardly excuse, the fanatic who wrecks this world for love of the other. But what are we to say of the fanatic who wrecks this world out of hatred for the other? He sacrifices the very existence of humanity to the non-existence of God. He offers his victims not to the altar, but merely to assert the idleness of the altar and the emptiness of the throne. He is ready to ruin even that primary ethic by which all things live, for his strange and eternal vengeance upon someone who never lived at all. And yet the thing hangs in the heavens unhurt. Its opponents only succeed in destroying all that they themselves justly hold dear. They do not destroy orthodoxy. They only destroy political and common courage sense. They do not prove that Adam was not responsible to God. How could they prove it? They only prove from their premises that the Tsar is not responsible to Russia. They do not prove that Adam should not have been punished by God. They only prove that the nearest sweater should not have been punished by men. With their oriental doubts about personality, they do not make certain that we shall have no personal life hereafter. They only make certain that we shall not have a very jolly or complete one here. With their paralyzing hints of all conclusions coming out wrong, they do not tear the book of the recording angel. They only make it a little harder to keep the books of Marshall and Snelgrove. Not only is the faith the mother of all worldly energies, but its foes are the fathers of all worldly confusion. The secularists have not wrecked divine things, but the secularists have wrecked secular things, if that is any comfort to them. The Titans did not scale heaven, but they laid waste the world. End of chapter 8, part 2.